Hello, I'm Larry Good with City TV. Welcome to this edition of Inside Santa Barbara, the city's only news magazine program. We keep you up to date on the city's most significant projects, issues, and events. Well, most of us have heard the term or used the term accident waiting to happen. Typically, that's just a gut feeling, but the city of Santa Barbara uses collision data to predict future crashes. In its newly adopted Vision Zero strategy, the city is redesigning collision hotspots, focusing its traffic enforcement efforts, and re-educating drivers and pedestrians alike to steer clear of distractions. It's all a collaborative effort to eliminate major traffic injuries. Karen Giuffre and her husband Greg Morey have lived on Las Positas Road across from Santa Barbara Municipal Golf Course since 1976.
The biggest improvement is the left-hand turn lane, as you can see.
For 43 years, they have witnessed firsthand the increasing traffic and speeds. Multiple times, they have heard from inside their home the screech of tires and that sobering sound of metal against metal as cars collide.
There was no designated left turn lane, so we were just depending upon the people behind us to see the car and stop. And I would hear crashes, and I'd go outside, and I saw some really bad things, really bad. People at that speed, even a rear ender, it can be really serious.
As a result of this pattern of collisions in a short stretch of Las Positas, the city of Santa Barbara has narrowed the southbound lane and restriped the roadway to include left turn lanes and left turn pockets. The City Public Works Department is using engineering and roadway design to prevent rear-end collisions and other speed-related crashes.
They did it in one day. I left to go visit my friends in Pismo Beach, and I saw them starting it, and by the time I got home, it was all done. So it couldn't be that expensive. It's just a lot better than it used to be. And we hope we can prevent collisions, not prevent them, eliminate them.
Traffic authorities have data showing multiple crashes at Las Positas and Macaw Avenue. Police reports reveal that northbound drivers turning left onto Macaw were hitting head-on into southbound drivers heading toward the freeway.
Sitting out in the shared through left turn lane, making that left turn maneuver, they were afraid they were going to get rear-ended. And because they were afraid they were going to get rear-ended, they were taking chances, shooting gaps in the opposite direction of traffic. So the engineering solution to that was to install a left turn lane.
A new southbound turn lane has also been created at the entrance to McKenzie Park. Back near Karen Giuffre's home, a new southbound left turn pocket was striped at Stanley Drive and another left turn pocket at Peregrina Road. And Karen Giuffre believes that restriping has slowed the traffic as well.
Maybe they just don't have the mentality that are on a freeway anymore. Maybe they see it's one lane, and now we drive like it's a road, not a freeway.
Those are the locations we want to spend our time on. That is very precious. We don't have all the time in the world, so we have to focus on the areas where we know a collision is going to reoccur.
Dayton is spearheading Santa Barbara's Vision Zero policy. It's an ambitious strategy to eliminate all severe and fatal injury collisions in the city of Santa Barbara by 2030. If you think that's unlikely, he points to the airline industry's Vision Zero program.
In 2017, there were no deaths in the passenger airline world. Conversely, in America, 40,000 Americans died via the automobile. It's just two different ways of thinking. And so at the city of Santa Barbara, we're adopting the new thinking, and that's changing the way we do projects.
Dayton says the city is leading the way in eliminating some old thinking that traffic injuries and deaths are inevitable. This includes changing the language we use from accidents to collisions.
There's always responsibility in why a collision occurs and people get hurt. And so we're taking responsibility for that why, and we're changing the engineering, the enforcement, the way we police, and the education to get people to understand that behaviors need to change in order to prevent collisions from occurring.
Santa Barbara's other Vision Zero corridor is along East Beach on Cabrillo Boulevard, the site of 3 serious and fatal injury collisions in the past 5 years. Further east through the S-curve, There have been 12 speed-related collisions over that same 5-year period.
So we looked at that pattern and we designed a roadway with the restriping and the pavement maintenance to address that specific pattern so that it will not repeat.
In late July, city road crews restriped back-in angle parking to replace the parallel parking. This created 28 additional parking spaces and narrowed a small section of eastbound Cabrillo Boulevard to 1 lane to help slow the traffic.
The back-in angle parking actually allows people to see really well when they're pulling out of their parking spaces. They can see in both directions, and it's legal to turn left out of the parking spaces to head back into the city. So there's a big safety benefit to this parking configuration.
So with Derek riding shotgun, I attempted for the first time the back-in angle design. I must admit it took a few seconds to get my bearings, but it's actually 1 less turn than the parallel parking configuration that used to be here. And the rear view camera in my car guided me in easily.
One maneuver of the steering wheel and back in. It's great that you have a reverse camera so you can line up your wheels between the spaces.
And the visibility both ways is much better when you leave the parking stall and pull back into traffic. Maybe you've noticed that the city's new road striping appears a little bolder and brighter than in the past. Bailey says this thermal plastic material lasts 10 times longer than paint.
Unlike paint, which wears down quite quickly, the thermoplastic has some thickness to it, so it appears bolder. And it'll last a lot longer too, which in the long term will reduce our maintenance costs.
Reducing serious injury to motorists is one part of Vision Zero. Equally important are the lives of bicyclists and pedestrians. While walkers and bike riders were 13% of Santa Barbara's commuter traffic over the past decade, they made up 62% of the city's serious and fatal traffic injuries.
So when we're in our car and we glance at the phone, or we are talking a little bit too much to that passenger and not paying attention, we could be setting ourselves up for the responsibility of someone getting hurt. Our focus is going to be on protecting the walker and the bicyclist more, because they're the ones that are getting mostly hurt.
Oh, there's one.
One part of Santa Barbara's Vision Zero enforcement strategy is a program to slow drivers down on busy corridors like De La Vina Street. Here, city transportation staff took turns posing as pedestrians crossing the intersection. Drivers failing to yield were cited.
You need to focus on the road, focus on scanning the left side, the right side, your mirrors, as well as what's in front of you, and drive at a safe speed.
Wagner says pedestrians are often distracted as well, looking at their phones without looking both ways. As a result, police have initiated a campaign called Keep 2 Steps Ahead.
You are thinking 2 steps ahead before you walk out into that intersection. Do you look to your left? Do you look to your right? Do you listen and hear for a vehicle coming?
So while lane reductions and restriping may work on some streets,
Other streets, enforcement may be the best tool. Other engineering improvements, such as traffic signals or crosswalks, those may be appropriate depending on the location.
whether the tools include re-engineering, stepped-up enforcement, or better public education, the bottom line with Vision Zero is traffic safety and saving lives. The driving public, pedestrians, bicyclists, and city government must buy into the concept that eliminating severe and fatal injuries is possible and act accordingly.
It's about keeping motorists, bicyclists, pedestrians safe. And it's all about safety.
The city is taking more responsibility. We're looking through a new lens, which means that we're not expecting people to get hurt. We're actually going to design and enforce and educate as though no one should be hurt on our roads.
For more information about Vision Zero, go to visionzeronetwork.org. Up next, we'll further explore Vision Zero by taking a closer look at a recent police department enforcement action.
Today we're working with the Santa Barbara Police Department to do some crosswalk enforcement. Crosswalk enforcement is one of the E's that we call it. So we do engineering, that's mainly the Public Works Department. In the past 5 years, we've done a lot of work. We've upgraded about 40 crosswalks in the city of Santa Barbara to make them safer. We also do education, teach drivers what the rules of the road are, and then also the enforcement component. That's what we're doing today. So those E's working together make the crosswalk safer.
On July 29th, the Santa Barbara Police Department conducted a traffic and pedestrian enforcement operation to improve the safety of pedestrians in crosswalks. This year's operation took place at the intersection of De La Vina and Los Olivos Street, a known high-conflict intersection between pedestrians and drivers.
The Santa Barbara Police Department is working diligently with our Traffic Division, our Transportation Division, and the California Office of Traffic Safety to ensure that our streetways and our pedestrian ways are safer than they have been in the past. What we're doing is enforcement, and that enforcement is to create an education atmosphere to contact delinquent drivers, riders, and pedestrians that are engaging in illegal or dangerous activity, and remind them of some of the consequences of that, including the fact that in 2018, here in Santa Barbara, there were 3 pedestrian fatalities, along with 67 pedestrian injuries due to drivers, riders, and pedestrians coming into contact with one another.
The purpose of crosswalk enforcement is to educate drivers and pedestrians on traffic laws meant to keep them safe on the road. The end goal, a city policy called Vision Zero, is to eliminate all traffic-related serious and fatal injuries on city streets by 2030.
We'll always be on the lookout. You know, any intersection, whether the crosswalk is painted or not, it's a legal crosswalk, and pedestrians have legal rights in those crosswalks. If you're on a multi-lane street, be aware of the guy beside you. If he's slowing down for something at the intersection, they may be stopping for a pedestrian, so don't go blowing past them.
You can be a driver, rider, or pedestrian and be very distracted. We're so distracted by our phones, by our smart devices, to where we can walk through an intersection and not pay attention to cross traffic. The same distraction for the driver, whether it be their navigation, their radio, or their phone, is responsible for some close calls, as well as some of those injuries that we just talked about.
California Vehicle Code states, vehicles must yield to pedestrians in crosswalks. Pedestrians must not suddenly leave the curb in front of a vehicle. Vehicles still have the duty to be operated safely given circumstances. However, a jaywalking pedestrian outside of a crosswalk must yield to vehicles. Remember, drivers and pedestrians share responsibility for keeping each other safe on the road.
Well, make yourself visible. Wait for a gap in traffic. Drivers, they may not be expecting to see you, and it takes longer for them to stop than pedestrians may realize. So the safest thing to do is to wait for a good gap in traffic. This is part of the work we're doing today. So the 3 E's go hand in hand, engineering, education, enforcement, to eliminate those injuries and fatalities.
The Santa Barbara Police Department's working with the Office of Traffic Safety on a campaign called Keep 2 Steps Ahead, to where you are thinking 2 steps ahead before you walk out into that intersection. Do you look to your left? Do you look to your right? Do you listen and hear for a vehicle coming? Could you possibly look and see a vehicle coming, see that that driver is potentially distracted looking at their phone, and then don't enforce your right-of-way. Let somebody like that pass and then travel to the other side of the road.
For more information about Santa Barbara's Vision Zero, visit santabarbaraca.gov/Vision Zero.
If you see a pedestrian in the crosswalk, slow down, then stop and let them cross safely. Well, right here on Mission Street between Highway 101 and State is one of the most traveled roads in Santa Barbara and in dire need of some attention. Let us show you how the pavement maintenance project is providing drivers with a smoother ride and improving pedestrian safety.
The road surface in Mission Street was in need of repair for a long time. There was a lot of humps and bumps on the road, At the end of the project, we'll be getting rid of all those inconveniences for the drivers.
But for many of the drivers that use this road, fixing the pains of the humps and bumps and the challenges of temporary limited vehicle access will be worth it in the end.
The construction on Mission Street is being highlighted due to a high volume of traffic and also high number of businesses and residents in the area.
In an attempt to reduce stress and inconvenience on both road users and the businesses, a number of steps are being taken.
We notified everybody during the design, and we notified them again just before the construction started. And for the third time, we notify everybody via the door hangers with more specific details of the construction, and also we post no parking signs, giving them the dates and hours that the construction is going to be happening.
Not only will the public be notified about the construction plans and changes, but the city website, www.santabarbaraca.gov, will be consistently updated as well. For now, the roads that are impacted by this project are Mission Street from the 101 to State Street and Los Olivos Street from Laguna Street over the Mission Canyon Bridge to the city limits.
We appreciate everybody's understanding and cooperation in order to help us to complete this project.
Despite the challenges this project will pose, the improvements will provide decades-long benefits. 12 access ramps meeting ADA requirements will line the street. Pedestrian crossings will be shortened, making them easier to navigate. Traffic signal reliability will be improved. The entire roadway surface will be repaved, and new trees will be planted to brighten up the corridor.
The construction for the Mission Street is scheduled to be completed by mid-September, and the overall construction should be completed by just before Christmas.
Until then, you can learn more about the project by visiting santabarbaraca.gov/Mission Street Paving. In 2003, the federal government passed into law the Healthy Forest Restoration Act to help protect local communities from the threat of wildfires. Now the city of Santa Barbara is updating its original wildfire protection plan. The Community Wildfire Protection Plan, or the CWPP, is a holistic approach for all manner of protection against the threat of wildfires in our community.
Community wildfire protection plans nationwide get their impetus from the Healthy Forest Restoration Act of 2003. We followed up on that immediately in 2004. We adopted our original CWPP, which is the Santa Barbara Wildland Fire Plan. And that is the one that we hope to renew right now.
A key part of the plan is the Environmental Impact Report, or EIR.
So a PEIR is a program EIR, and that's when you evaluate a whole series of different smaller actions together as one larger project. So it allows you to take, let's say, for example, vegetation management and public education and a whole host of other things, and evaluate them as a whole and also cumulatively, so you see how they all interact together.
The EIR and the CWPP can be done either way. You can do them as separate documents. We prefer to do them together because they're intricately tied to each other. The EIR speaks to the CWPP. The reason that we want it that way is so that when we go do future projects, say in vegetation management, we have a vegetation management unit, say, up by St. Mary's. We need to have an overarching EIR that tells us what we can and cannot do within that area.
Our environment changes over time, and keeping the CWPP and the EIR up to date will serve as a new framework for future long-term wildfire protection projects.
Everything over time needs to be updated just to keep it current. For instance, the accompanying EIR, Environmental Impact Report, that goes with our CWPP needs to be updated because things change in the general topo of the area over time, and you need to make sure that new species haven't arrived or things have changed in the environment that require an update of the EIR. Likewise with the CWPP, you want to account for new construction that's taken place in the area and all of the general approach to wildland protection that may be different from the way it was in 2004.
Every year there's changes to the landscape of the community. Different fuels. We've had, since 2004, we've had probably a dozen landscape changing fires in the county, and Santa Barbara City has been surrounded by these fires.
The City of Santa Barbara received a state grant in the amount of $310,000 to update the CWPP and the EIR.
So the state and CAL FIRE have a long history of giving out grants for the protection of citizens, either through fuel reduction, education, or planning. The Community Wildfire Protection Plan the Santa Barbara City Fire received for the grant to update the CWPP and the EIR was part of the planning process, and the state and CAL FIRE does feel that CWPPs are an important part of keeping communities safe during vegetation fires.
Well, we have a time limit on this one. We need to get this CWPP and the EIR done by March of 2021. The March of 2021 date is important because we're operating under a grant from CAL FIRE, and we have a certain time limit to complete that grant process. So we hope to get the drafts of both of those documents, the CWPP and the EIR, done by February of 2021 so we can present them to CAL FIRE as a finished product.
Updating the CWPP may help the city receive other state grants for different projects.
It does potentially help with a lot of funding sources, not only the state, other grant processes that the city can get involved in. It helps because the CWPP will identify projects, projects and programs that could be not related to fuel reduction, but maybe improvements to homes that make homes more fire resistive. But having that on a plan approved by the City Council, and also an EIR report that is vetted and approved, makes the projects and programs in Santa Barbara City much more likely to receive grants, because these would be something we call like a shovel-ready project, or just a package program that's ready to go. Because a lot of grants have sunset dates on them, including the CWPP grant that Santa Barbara City is obtained through the state last year.
The goal of this plan is to create a safer community and to expand our existing CWPP and EIR so that we're more encompassing the areas surrounding the city as well as the city itself, so that we are interfacing with our neighbors, for instance, the Montecito Fire Protection District, the County Fire Protection District, and the National Forest, so that we're taking into consideration the neighbors that border us as well as within the city, and to create a safer environment to protect the citizens from wildland fire.
This effort will include a collaborative approach with adjacent jurisdictions.
Fire doesn't stop at jurisdictional boundaries. What comes in, actually we saw it recently in the Thomas fire, the fire doesn't stop right at the border. It goes where fire will go. So it's very important for us to coordinate with the surrounding jurisdictions. We're unique here in Santa Barbara that we have many surrounding jurisdictions. Their actions and their mitigation efforts directly affect what we do, just the same the different mitigations, fuel treatment, evacuation work that we do here in the city could potentially affect them if a fire were to start here in the city and expand outwards.
The process for developing the plan has several key elements, including what are the fire hazards and risks.
Some of the key elements that we're going to be looking at in developing this community wildfire protection plan are specifically what our hazards and our risks are here in the city. When we're looking at hazards, we're looking at what fire hazards do we have? What's our potential for spotting? What's the potential for a fire to even start? Looking at ignition potential. What kind of vegetation do we have out there? Slopes, topography, how that all comes into play. Then when we look at risks, we're looking at what we have in place as far as structures, road conditions, what defensible space we have done or haven't done, community-wide projects, what we have for public education, home hardening. There's a wealth of different areas that this community wildfire protection plan is going to be looking at.
Successful mitigation strategies include looking at larger vegetative management areas outside of defensible space, where fuels treatment in effect slows down the spread of wildfires.
One example of this goes back to about 10 years ago during the Tea Fire. We had just started a large project up at what was St. Mary's Seminary up off of Los Canoas Road. It was a 20-acre vegetation management project area. We started on the east side of St. Mary's Seminary. We had done a couple acres of fuels treatment work shortly before the Tea Fire came through. That Tea Fire came through with the intensity that we've all seen, that we know, that we've seen the pictures or maybe experienced firsthand. However, when it came up to the seminary, we noticed exactly what we hoped to see. We saw a decrease in fire intensity, flame lengths were less. We actually had firefighters up there at the seminary who reported the same. And while conditions were untenable in many areas, and while it wasn't comfortable up there, they were able to stay and make a stand and protect that seminary.
Many city departments will be involved so that in the future, the departments can look to the policies to work together and carry out the goals of the plan.
Other city departments, in fact, almost every other city department will be involved in developing this plan. For example, we will incorporate the police department as they're one of the primary departments that help us with evacuation in times of a fire. We're going to be working with Public Works as we look at those evacuation routes, as we look at road closures, as we look at existing systems for things such as bridges. We'll also look at Parks and Recreation. A number of our vegetation management areas and large open spaces are the number of parks that we have throughout the city. So those all play an important factor when putting together this community-wide plan.
Wildfire, please drive to Foothill Road and make a right turn to Alomar Road. Then proceed to the Earl Warren Showgrounds.
Coordination of the different departments in the city is ongoing when we're looking at our threat from wildland fire. We will be working together as we develop this plan, but through the future, we'll also be working closely to look at the different policies and actions that were identified in the plan and how we can consistently work together to achieve those different policies and actions. An example is the Firescape Garden, where we're standing right now. The efforts to maintain this Firescape Garden as an example for the city and the residents of defensible space is the culmination of the work from many different departments. The fire department, of course, but we also work very closely with Public Works and Water Resources to ensure that the plants that we have here are not invasive species, that they're drought tolerant, so that the messages that the various departments are trying to get out throughout the city are consistent with the message for mitigating our wildfire threat that we have here in the fire department.
In the coming months, the fire department will be holding workshops to get input from the community.
There is an education component to every CWPP, and it starts with the component where we basically daylight what we're doing with this creation of the CWPP with stakeholder meetings and public meetings. And that way we can disseminate information as well as we can learn from the public what they feel should be in a CWPP. As you know, this is a very fire-savvy community, and people are aware of fire issues and they have their own opinions, and we want them to come out and express those opinions when we have public meetings. So there's a give and take there.
After the completion of the Environmental Impact Report, it will be accepted and registered by the state, and the Community Wildfire Protection Plan will be submitted to CAL FIRE. The Santa Barbara City Fire Department is committed to finding new and improved ways to battle wildfires to keep our community safe. For more information, visit Santa Barbara Fire Department online at santabarbaraca.gov/wildland. Up next, we take a look at some of our most productive and fragile ecosystems, lagoons and estuaries.
Estuaries are bodies of water which are found where rivers and streams meet the ocean. Their unique qualities place them among the most productive ecosystems in the world. Because of this, many different types of animals rely on estuaries for food, breeding, and migration. Not only do they nurture biodiversity, but they help purify water, produce fish, store carbon dioxide, and protect shorelines from floods and erosion.
Estuaries are really important habitats and really interesting to study because they straddle the ocean and the freshwater inputs. And so sometimes they can be a mix of both. Sometimes they can be filled mostly with freshwater. Sometimes they can be filled mostly with ocean water. And so they are very dynamic. And so the species that you're going to see, the water quality that you're going to see is going to change hour to hour, day to day, week to week, season to season.
And in these environments, we have what's called brackish water, which is a mixture of salt water and fresh water. And that creates a really specialized habitat for a lot of plants, animals, various wildlife. And so it serves as really important habitat for a variety of things, such as migratory birds that use it as they stop along their route. It serves as breeding habitat for a lot of commercially important fish. And it's home to a lot of plants as well as invertebrates such as crabs.
There isn't many areas left in Southern California like this. Most of them have been filled for development, about 90% of them. So they're kind of a rare habitat, and the transition zone is important for a lot of species, especially aquatic fish species like the tidewater goby, which is endangered, and the Southern California steelhead trout.
And the tidewater goby is a small fish, 2 to 3 inches long. It lives on the sandy bottom of the estuaries. It can't live for a long time in ocean water or fresh water, so it's really relegated to living just in our small estuaries.
The tidewater goby is just one example of an animal that thrives in our local estuaries. The flora and fauna that live in these areas are dependent on the delicate mix of fresh water and salt water. To maintain this balance, ensuring the health of these diverse and complex habitats extends to us all.
Our estuaries and lagoons are very important to the society here in Santa Barbara, to our community. They're important for recreation. They're important for our economy, areas to gather, areas for recreation. But our estuaries have also been degraded over the years. They've been polluted, they've been littered, they've been diverted, dredged, and filled.
What little is left of these lagoons, we want to try to improve so that they're operating as optimal or as best as possible. And we want to make sure that the water quality is as good as we can make it, and that there's native plants around it, and that we have the right conditions for those fish to live and survive.
One of the ways the health of our watershed is measured is through regular water quality testing. In the city of Santa Barbara, this work falls to the dedicated staff of the city's Creeks Division, whose main purpose is the stewardship of our watersheds.
So the test results give us a baseline of what's out there, and then we can look at that and over time see if we are making improvements with projects that we've completed, and then also shows us where we might still need to make improvements on. So if there may be specific watersheds that might be high in a particular pollutant, so if we find a pollutant here, we know that pollutant's coming from somewhere upstream. And that gives us a chance to then try to go back upstream, and we can test different tributaries and see where that might be coming from.
Extensive testing includes measuring for bacteria, pH conductivity, oxygen levels, and expands even more during storms to test for heavy metals, automotive pollutants, and nutrients associated with pesticides and herbicides, all of which are indicators of the health of these fragile ecosystems.
Our estuaries and lagoons are known as nurseries of the sea because of the important breeding and feeding habitat they provide for many fisheries. And one example is the halibut. We all like halibut. It's consumed widely across the United States. Young halibut spend time in the estuaries shortly after they're hatched from their eggs in order to protect themselves from predation of larger fish out in the ocean.
So some species are specialized to be tolerant of broad ranges of salinity and temperature, and others will just come in and out with the predominantly freshwater or predominantly saline water. So you don't necessarily know what you're going to find until you get there and start sampling. And we have added in the last few years bioassessment of our estuaries, and so that is going to the estuary and taking from a small area, collecting all of the small aquatic invertebrates that are there,
and then identifying them and classifying them and trying to see if we can find unique sets of organisms for particular estuaries.
To help keep the estuaries vital, one of the things that experts recommend is not to breach the sand berm where the lagoon meets the beach.
Breaching occurs naturally in these estuaries, typically during the winter months when there's enough rainfall and storm surge to break down these sand berms that have built at the end of lagoons. Artificial breaching typically takes place during summer months for a variety of reasons. Sometimes people want easier access to the ocean. Sometimes there's a smell coming from the lagoon and people try to break down that sand berm. Now the problem with that is species that live in these lagoons have adapted to the natural cycle that estuaries take. And so when you artificially breach during a time of year when it doesn't typically happen, it really upsets the life cycle that these species have adapted to live in.
Because of that, we don't like to see those berms on the beach breached, in other words, broken, and then the water spilled out. What that can do is, for instance, with the tidewater goby, they're a pretty small fish and they're not super strong swimmers. It can actually wash them out into the ocean and they die, and if they're really small, when they breed in the summer, it can also wash the young out and they get killed. So physically there's issues with it, and then there's issues with the water itself. When it drains, the water it can lower the level of the lagoon, then it reduces the amount of habitat for all the aquatic species in there. It can change water quality and dissolved oxygen and lots of things.
There are many steps you can take in your daily routine that directly affect the health of our watersheds.
Don't throw your trash or anything else in there, and pick up after your dog around the perimeter of the lagoon and things like that, just to keep it clean and healthy. And then if you live further up the watershed, we don't want people dumping things into their storm drains or into the creek anywhere along the way, because that'll eventually end up here.
One of the most important things is to reduce uses of pesticides. Pesticides are used to target particular damaging insects in your yard and garden, but as soon as they get washed off, they're poisoning every living aquatic insect that's in a creek or estuary. And we have found high levels of some of the newer pesticides, such as the neonicotinoid pesticides, in our creeks and estuaries.
And we educate the public about the importance of these habitats so that they'll know they're important areas to protect. And one way we do that is we do annual creek cleanups in the area, where we lead groups of volunteers out along our creeks and our estuaries, picking up litter, as well as educating the volunteers about the importance of the estuaries and lagoons, the species that occur there, and the reasons why it's important to protect them.
For more information on how to keep our oceans and creeks healthy and clean, visit santabarbaraca.gov/creeks. In 2007, the City of Santa Barbara initiated a program called SLIP, the Sewer Lateral Inspection Program, to address sewage spills on private property. Today, that program is being reviewed to make it easier for homeowners to repair broken and leaky sewer lines.
Down the ABS line.
The Sewer Lateral Inspection Program, or SLIP, is the city program by which sewer laterals are inspected using video recordings conducted by an inspector or plumber. The goal of the program is to reduce the number of sewage spills occurring on private property, which can lead to pollution of our groundwater, creeks, and ocean.
A sewer lateral is a pipe that carries sanitary sewage waste from the fixtures in your house or property down to the City of Santa Barbara sewer main.
When the SLIP program started 12 years ago, the city sent out approximately 75 letters a year to private property owners regarding their sewer lateral. Today, that number is over 800, and the city is revising the program to be proactive with private property owners to continue to identify issues and eliminate sewer spills.
This program also helps us better manage that connection to the city sewer main system, which defective lateral connections can also cause a public spill. In 2012, City Council also revamped the program to focus in on commercial and industrial properties and their sewer laterals. And so the city embarked in 2013 on inspecting all commercial and industrial sewer laterals within a 10-year time frame.
There is approximately 300 miles of sewer lateral pipes that connects private property to the city's main sewer.
There's over 24,000 sewer lateral connections carrying that sewage from the building down to the city's sewer main. While we have roughly 257 miles of city sewer main, we have well over 300 miles of sewer laterals. That number is the best number that we have right now, but we know it's more than that.
The maintenance and repair of the lateral, including the connection to the sewer main via what is called the Y, is the responsibility of the private property owner.
In the city of Santa Barbara, the property owner is responsible for their sewer lateral from the building down to and including the connection to the city's main. Sometimes this is in the roadway or in the parkway or within an easement, depending on each person's location. In the graphic, the ownership of the private property owner is shown in orange, which shows the connection, or that Y as it's often called, and that's the responsibility of the property owner. The gray is where the city's responsibility lies.
As property owners, it's helpful to think about your sewer laterals like you think about your roof and appliances. Every item has a certain lifespan.
So many homeowners are familiar with the expected lifespan of things like their roof or appliances in their kitchen or their washing machine, but many are not aware that they own a sewer lateral or are aware that they should be inspecting their sewer lateral, especially since it's buried underground. In comparison to many of the other appliances or features of your home, a sewer lateral actually has a relatively long lifespan, somewhere between 50 and 70 years. And if you haven't inspected your sewer lateral, it might be time to do that because most homes in Santa Barbara are reaching that 70-year or older range.
There are three main reasons for receiving a letter from the city as to why you need to have your lateral inspected.
Currently, there are three ways a sewer lateral inspection program case could be initiated. First being one of the commercial or industrial scheduled cases. Those cases were programmed in 2012 in order to start in 2013. And it's a systematic approach throughout the city, specifically focusing on commercial industrial properties. The second trigger is a permit-initiated case. So if you install 2 or more new plumbing fixtures or add 400 square feet or more to your residence and you ask for a building permit, that would initiate a sewer lateral inspection. And the third is with the residential city-initiated cases, and that really comes from our overall comprehensive CCTV program. The city has a goal of inspecting all the sewer mains within a 10-year time frame, and we're about halfway through that right now. The city owns a CCTV unit that's mobile, that drives around and inspects the sewer mains as necessary. And when staff discovers a defect on a sewer lateral, they will create a sewer lateral inspection program case, assign it to our wastewater staff that are in the office, and that staff will then initiate the process for remedying that defect.
If a private property owner is notified with a notice to repair letter by the city that they need to inspect their sewer lateral, there are steps the property owner needs to take.
The first thing that they need to do is get a certified plumber from the list that is provided, which is also online, the city's website. Plumber will come out and you'll hand them the letter and they will take it from there.
Wastewater staff uses the city's computerized maintenance management software, Cartograph OMS, to manage the commercial and industrial scheduled cases for inspections. They also track residential initiated cases as well as permit related cases in order to be able to provide the letters that are sent to property owners.
Once the plumber is done with the initial inspection, the video is sent to city staff for review. Then staff will determine the need for repair, replacement, or rehabilitation.
So when we get the video and the inspection form back from the plumber for a particular property, city staff will review that and then make the necessary recommendations on type of repairs that are needed for that particular lateral. If you have just a 2-foot, 4-foot spot repair, they could dig and replace that up and it would be into an acceptable condition. If there's more issues throughout that sewer lateral, you can use the rehabilitation method so long as there is no major voids, no offsets, which would prevent what they call a liner, lateral liner, from being installed. And then you have your pipe bursting method to replace. To go ahead and dig a couple pits, do a pipe burst, pulling a new section of pipe through.
Proper maintenance is the key to keeping a sanitary sewer from overflowing. The impact from overflow not only costs the property owner time and money, it also potentially puts the city in violation of the Clean Water Act.
So the impact from a poorly maintained sewer lateral can be a blockage, it causes damage in your house, or sometimes that sewage can be discharged into the environment and ultimately make it to our creeks and our ocean.
First and foremost is the maintenance issue, which would be the roots that would be causing problems, whether it be to the property itself or to the city main, which ultimately would cause a sanitary sewer overflow.
So in 2018, we had over 30 private sewer spills resulting from improper maintenance or neglect of sewer laterals. 5 out of our 7 public spills directly related to faulty lateral connections with roots coming on them.
If it's maintained properly and in good condition, that would prevent any kind of root growth from entering into that sewer lateral.
There are after-hour classes on every 3rd Wednesday of the month to help guide you through the SLIP program.
Proper maintenance of the sewer lateral plays a really important role in protecting Santa Barbara's way of life with the clean beaches, the clean creeks, and just the healthy environment we live in.
For more information on the SLIP program, go to santabarbaraca.gov/SLIP. You know, most people don't know how drinking water gets to their house, and our next story will show you a critical part of the system that keeps the water flowing from your faucets.
The city of Santa Barbara has a complex water system that includes reservoirs, dams, groundwater wells, a desalination plant, treatment, pumping, and distribution facilities. The backbone of this water system is the 300-plus miles of underground water mains which deliver the water to over 26,000 city water customers. In order to maintain a safe and reliable water system, the city proactively replaces about 2% of this critical water main infrastructure each year.
For decades, the city has replaced 1% of its water system. Of course, the city wasn't all built at 1% at a time, so there was periods of growth. Mainly the water mains that were installed in the late 1940s, early 50s are in most need of replacement. So we studied the problem and we went to council and talked to them about the need to replace water main at a higher rate. And we made the decision to replace 2% of the city's water system for about the next 20 to 25 years.
Water mains distribute potable water to all the customers of the city of Santa Barbara, for residences and for commercial businesses or all that, but deliver water from the treatment plant to the houses or to the customers. And they need to be replaced as they age out. Their structural integrity diminishes and they'll corrode, or the water mains will leak, and then eventually they'll break.
Water mains aren't inspected while in use because they're pressurized and there's no industry inspection standard.
So it starts with a planning team. We have a team comprised of engineers and operators and people who are really close to our water system needs. And what they do is we'll use our GIS databases as well as other databases to review all the information that we have regarding the age, type of pipe, criticality of the pipeline, how it's interconnected to the system, any main breaks that have happened, and we compile all that information. And then there's a human component to it where, you know, we know certain specific details about areas where you really want to make sure that your water system's not going to have a break, and so we focus on those areas and prioritize on a multi-year basis. Trenching is the traditional way that we replace water main, and so usually what it'll start off with is installing the new pipe. Before you go ahead and you abandon the old pipe, you tie over all the services to the new pipe. You make sure it's chlorinated, disinfected, it's passed all its different tests that are required, and after that the new main's put in service.
So typically a water main you can do about 500 feet a week total, and that's about a city block in a week. They'll install it and they'll have it paved in about a week. And so during that time, during that 1 week, there'll be construction activity, there'll be contractors, and there'll be limited movement, but we always try and keep at least one lane of traffic open and allow residents to get in and out of their driveways. And typically they'll have maybe one shutdown where during the time of a replacement where the water will get shut off so that they can connect it to the new line. The next layer, or a layer of kind of collaboration, is working with the streets department to try and coordinate our main replacements with paving. You know, it's a level of effort using GIS and using asset management software to try and coordinate our efforts so that once we've done sewer work, we've done water work, and then do paving, to leave the streets in good condition at the end of it, because it is disruptive to have to cut into the streets to put the new main in and have heavy equipment on it. We're working on coordinating and having better coordination amongst our departments so that we have the streets left with the best product we can leave them with.
So Measure C has nothing to do with the doubling of the water main program. It was a coincidence, if you want to call it that, a recognition that we needed to spend more to maintain our streets, but we also needed to spend more to maintain our underground infrastructure. And so those two programs are coming together at the same time, and that's leading to a lot of work going on right now in the public right-of-way.
To report a water main break, call 805-564-5413, or if it's after hours, call 805-963-4286.
To learn more about Santa Barbara's water system, visit santabarbaraca.gov/water. Well, there's a new spot for dog owners and their pets to socialize and enjoy the outdoors. Mary Lou Cisneros has that story.
3, 2, 1. Yeah! Dog power! Yeah!
On June 24th, the City of Santa Barbara Parks and Recreation Department opened a new fenced off-leash dog area at Mackenzie Park at State and De La Vina Streets.
We had community members asking us for a fenced area, one that could accommodate both small dogs and large dogs in separate environments. In unfenced areas, oftentimes there could be a large dog that takes advantage of or bullies a small dog. So that allows us to achieve that purpose.
We looked at every park as part of the process as what would be the best place to put it, and through discussion and the narrowing of the field, we realized that this is so close to all the residents here. There's also 3 dog-related businesses just across the street, down the street, and it was underutilized. So we decided that we bring the happy dogs and the happy people here, which will clear out some of that and really vitalize this corner of the park.
The half-acre area located on the eastern end of the park used to be the Parks and Recreation's Youth Activities building, which hadn't been used in about 15 years. It now features 2 off-leash dog areas, one for small dogs under 20 pounds and one for large dogs.
Like, not every owner wants their small, like, Chihuahua to be with the big pit bull, but like either way, like, it's just great mostly for big dogs. I think it's best for them. There's not really a spot in Santa Barbara where you can take a big dog and just let them be themselves. So it's really great that they have their own spot, like dedicated spot to just be, a dog.
The small dogs area is 6,000 square feet, and the large dog area is 14,000 square feet, giving dogs like Blakey plenty of space to run around and socialize.
This is her second day coming to the dog park. Yesterday she was kind of like scared, like, okay, what am I in? Where am I? Right now I see her more happier, playing with everybody, specifically with bigger dogs, which keeps me kind of safe, because before I would take her on a walk, I'm like, oh, that's a big dog. My dog is a big, small dog. But now she looks perfectly fine, happy.
To make sure dogs have a happy and safe visit to the park, there are rules that need to be followed. These rules are posted at the entrance of both areas.
It's not a dog babysitting area where you can just leave them and go, because if there's a fight or something, you have to be there to help break it up and manage your dog.
Both areas have a double door, a drinking water fountain for the dogs, waste bags, trash cans, a sitting area for owners, rocks and trees for dogs to play, and high fences which go below the gravel to prevent digging and jumping.
People like their dogs to get exercise, and sometimes they just want to enjoy being there. And It gives them an opportunity to exercise their dogs without having to walk great distances or travel to a park that's outside of their neighborhood.
This is the only fenced off-leash dog area in Santa Barbara. It's open 7 a.m. to sunset, and it can be accessed from State Street and the Mackenzie Park parking lot.
There's no bad thing for dog lovers in this park. It's like you get to play with all these different types of dogs, all these different ages of dogs, puppies, older senior dogs, and it's just like great. Like anyone who loves dogs, it's like a great spot just to come and like honestly, if you don't even have a dog, just sit down and like watch and play with the dogs. Like it's not, yeah, it's perfect honestly.
The off-leash dog area is just part of a series of improvements planned for Mackenzie Park. Other changes such as renovated restrooms and accessibility updates are set to begin later this year. Well, you may have noticed there are some new additions here on State Street. 6 steel statues with a special purpose. Sierra Coleman has that story.
The city has a long history with public art through its state-of-the-art gallery. Each year, 2 unique exhibits are installed on State Street to enhance the public streetscape and to spark people's sense of curiosity to explore each sculpture. In 1999, foundations or pads were installed on State Street to facilitate the placement of art, and this year the Office of Arts and Culture booked something extra special.
So the library is working with the County Office of Arts and Culture, Santa Barbara Beautiful, the Santa Barbara Library Foundation, and downtown Santa Barbara, as well as the city, to install tiny libraries on State Street.
We did an open call for submissions, call for art in the Tri-County area, and asked that artists send their ideas for what a library sculpture could be, a sculpture that holds books functionally.
I responded to that call and gave them half a dozen concepts for different types of sculptures that could hold books and that would allow the functionality they wanted and also be durable enough to be used in a public space. They elected to do the punctuation.
We thought this one was the most playful and fun, and that the punctuation kind of capitalized on the literary tie-in, but also would be bright and colorful and large scale and interactive and sort of pop on State Street.
Art fit for a public space was a challenge this group of collaborators faced head-on. Not only did the art have to be safe, durable, and sensitive to the El Pueblo Viejo Historic District, but it also had to be easy on the eyes.
Every small detail is addressed before construction begins, just to make sure that every component of the libraries adhered to all of the design guidelines and was safe for the public to use.
It's got to be more durable, and it has to abide by all these code restrictions for, you know, wheelchair access, blind people, you know, ADA rules and all these other things.
He's very aware of what it takes to construct something so well that it can withstand being in the public right-of-way. So he calls it the gorilla test, the idea that if you're in a zoo and gorillas can swing on it, that's what would make it safe.
With the concept agreed upon and the design requirements met, 6 different punctuation marks now line State Street. A question mark, hashtag, percentage sign, ampersand, exclamation point, and an ole.
We're really excited about having an ole or the double exclamation point to represent Spanish language, because we have so many Spanish speakers. Making intentional space and art to speak to our community is very much what this project is about.
Obviously with punctuation, you know, you've narrowed it now to a linguistic style. In this case, you know, the majority of them are English, but we want to include other languages.
Each of these statues has a special function. They're also tiny libraries. They hold a number of books that residents are encouraged to take and enjoy.
I think it's wonderful to do this because the world needs to read more.
Tiny libraries where you can borrow a book, leave a book, take a book. These are just wonderful things to have for our children and be examples for.
The library spent many months collecting books for the exhibit, so as long as these statues are on State Street, they will be filled.
The books come from a variety of sources, so oftentimes people are cleaning out their bookshelves and looking for a home for books that are gently used, and so over the last couple months we've just sort of put the word out that we are collecting them, and then we have volunteers that sort and organize them so that we are putting forth like collections of popular materials that people will be excited to take.
I was looking for a particular book, like maybe I'd chancely find it, but I did find Kitchen Confidential by Anthony Bourdain, which is a good read.
Residents and visitors can also leave books in these tiny libraries for someone else to take. As you can see, a lot went into the planning of these tiny libraries, and they're definitely being put to good use.
The library is going to be hosting some events on the first Thursdays that the exhibition will be up, as well as popping up with story times for children and families. Local authors will be reading their work and making them available in the tiny libraries. Our partnership with the Santa Barbara Poet Laureate will also coordinate some poetry readings, and library staff will be at the tiny libraries offering personalized book recommendations and helping people find their next favorite read as well.
It's kind of cool to come out on first Thursdays and see everybody interacting with these tiny libraries and get a good feel about it.
I think it's just a great way to interact with people in a different way on State Street.
Though a great addition to State Street, they won't be here forever.
Even though it might be a temporary art installation on State Street for 3 months, they will have a life beyond that.
After their debut on State Street, we hope to pop them up at community centers and libraries. We've been approached by schools and health clinics, and everyone seems to be very interested in being a next home to a public tiny library.
If you want to find out more information about the Office of Arts and Culture, go to sbac.ca.gov. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of Inside Santa Barbara. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or comments, please give us a call at City TV at 564-5311. And if you missed anything, no worries. You can always catch us online at santabarbaraca.gov. I'm your host, Larry Good. Remember, get involved inside Santa Barbara.